I'm Temeko Richardson, and I'm joined today by my friend, Trey Johnson, a former NFL offensive lineman. Today, our topic of discussion is the exploitation of violence in sports. Welcome, Trey.
Thank you.
So, being a former NFL offensive lineman, what do you think is the biggest exploitation of violence in the sports industry itself?
Well, I think there's kind of a contradiction in terms of the message that we send to our youth in sports today and then the actual things that we use to sell the sport. I think that in sports, the beauty of the contest sometimes is lost when we highlight some of the life-threatening or life-taking injuries for means of selling that particular sport to our audience. And I think it sends a bad image to the youth of today as to what's to be expected of them in their particular sports and what people want to see.
But, okay, so you mentioned that it sends a bad message to the youth, but, I mean, we see parents. When I went to the opening game of the season where the Broncos and the Ravens battled it out, I'm in Denver, and the people behind me were just all, step on them, crush them. I mean, these were grown people, like in their 50s and 60s. So we're saying it's a bad image for the kids, but they're learning it from their parents.
Oh, definitely. I think they're learning it from the parents, the coaches, the media, but I think the media has more of a responsibility because it's a vehicle to broadcast the image or the foundations of what we believe these sports should be about, and to hype up the negative aspects of it, to kill them, to crush them, paralyze, the things you hear people and fans say, I think sends a bad message to kids who are just learning the game. It leads to improper technique, improper motivation, and then some of these injuries like the concussions that we're seeing today and the post-concussion syndromes are all tied to that, in my opinion, because we don't necessarily give proper fundamentals and philosophy in terms of motivating these kids to play the game the right way.
So as a former NFL offensive lineman, you protect the quarterback. You're hitting all kinds of people, and that's your goal, to block anyone from hitting the quarterback. So that is an attraction. People want to see that. So what do you think of that?
I mean, as well they should. I mean, I'm not saying take away the physical elements, the contact or the physicality of the game. And violent things are going to happen. There are going to be times when people sustain a great deal of, significant injury playing the sport. But it all goes back to the highlights they show on your ESPNs, your local news. Why accentuate those things, the late hits, some of the penalties, some of the fights in hockey, the fights in baseball? You could just as easily highlight the positive occurrences of those sports contests, show people the better things that happen, what you want the sport to be about, instead of, when an offensive lineman like myself, if you make a great block, do you ever see that on TV? Is that the highlights you remember? Nobody remembers offensive linemen preventing sacks, making great blocks for running backs, allowing wide receivers to catch those, awe-inspiring touchdown passes. What they see about us is just the big guys up front. Everybody's following the ball. But as soon as somebody comes across and gets that big hit on an unsuspecting wide receiver or running back, that's what you see flipped on ESPN over and over again. Me stalemating another all-pro defensive lineman, nobody cares. And I'm not saying you should accentuate line play. My thing is when you're showing it to kids and to the public, show them the beauty of the route that guy ran or the one-handed catch or things like that, as opposed to, the defenseless receiver getting hit and the taunting and all the exploits that come from, personal individual styles that don't necessarily reflect the game's philosophy.
Now, you brought up a good thing about hockey. I mean, let's take it for example. You go to a Rangers game, and in any game, we're looking at where's the fight. I mean, that's the attraction to it. And, of course, that's going to be a highlight, like you said. Is there something wrong with America by wanting to see those types of things?
I mean, you could make that argument. And don't get me wrong, my position is not to take violence out of the game. I, too, go to a hockey game to see them rumble. I want to see the gloves drop, and I want to see them get them on, put them on their pockets, all of that good stuff. What I do think, though, is that do not criticize the athletes and the people who do these things. If somebody makes a great hit and then is demonized on ESPN or some other sports network for making that hit, and then you're trying to loop it for the next hour straight on your highlight reel, it's being hypocritical to me. Either we are a violent culture that goes to the hockey games to see the fights, that goes to see the big hits, and let's accept that. Let's own that. Or if we're trying to have this moral high ground that we seem to be hearing a lot about, you can't do that by accentuating. some of the extracurricular violence that may go on in the course of the game.
So it definitely helps ratings. For the perspective of the NFL, I mean, there was a big thing with, for example, Sean Payton getting suspended for an entire year as the head coach of the New Orleans Saints because he supposedly, had some type of deals with bounties going on for the team. So do you think that that's wrong?
Oh, I do. Now, when you're talking about bounties, I think you're attacking and you're compromising other people's livelihoods. Athletes, we feed our kids by playing our sport. Mm-hmm. Hitting somebody squarely, fairly is all a part of the game. Trying to take them out, by attacking a previous injury or an unsuspecting player to utilize that as a means of winning, I think is completely wrong.
One of the things that we've seen in the NFL as viewers and spectators is that these late hits that get the fines, who really benefits from these fines?
That is a great question, and I have no clue where the money received from those fines goes.
Well, do you know that the NFL is a nonprofit organization?
I do know that.
So it's a billion dollar revenue generating nonprofit organization.
Gotta love America for that one.
Right. Who else benefits from all of the exploitation of violence?
I mean, I once again, I believe it goes back to these sports media networks and outlets. They benefit from it because they get great material to propagandize all the villainous behavior of, quote unquote, these athletes. But like you say, they're fined readily and frequently. Mm-hmm. Once again, where does that money go? I think the NFL or the organizations that do the fining benefit from them. The athletes definitely don't benefit from it. Somebody getting hurt is not benefiting from it. And I think it goes back to these people, these athletes, we were taught from very early ages how to play this game. And now you're being penalized for playing the game in the manner in which you were instructed without, a transition period. Like you're telling people, okay, you can't get hit here. Like basically you can only hit somebody in a space of the size of a quarter now and go against everything you've been taught your entire life on how to play the game. You're fined for it, a great deal of money.
Right.
And I don't even believe the athletes get to write that off, do they?
No.
If it's a nonprofit organization, the athletes should be able to write it off, you would think.
Right. I'm Temeko Richardson, and thanks for watching.